Hi, guys. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Clear Sun podcast. This is François. I'm here with Roel this morning. Hey, Roel, how are you?
Hello, good morning.
So today we're going to talk about Wi-Fi design, showcase a little bit on how we do it in the tools we have in Ekahau, and I guess explain why we do certain things and how we do it on our end, so you can have a better idea of what it takes or what it looks like to actually do Wi-Fi design.
Yeah, we'll just go through some examples. We got two examples that I'll share my screen, and we'll just kind of talk to I guess, our method, how we walk through a floor plan, and what we're thinking when we are trying to make a design for a customer. Because obviously predictive, this is going to be a predictive model, right? So we're going to do a predictive design, but there are a lot of steps that go into getting to this stage of the design, right? So we're going to assume that we've already done the planning piece, the data gathering, talking to the customer and everyone else who is important in order to get the data. So we're just going to kind of pre-fill that information for this portion, and we can talk about data collection and planning in a different episode, but this one will strictly be about the design aspect to it.
Mhm.
And
Exactly. So,
yeah.
no, I was going to say the goal at this point, the goal for stuff the design would be to figure out exactly, how many APs we'll need to meet the requirements, where to place them, how to install them, and then document all of that information so we can pass it along to the installer so they can install it, physically install the equipment.
Yeah, so the two floor plans that we'll go through is, one is a pretty small office, so it's a carpeted office space, and then the second one will be a warehouse, and we'll talk to each because they're different environments, and we'll see how this goes, right? And we'll try to
Mhm.
answer questions that people may come up with as we're doing it. We'll try out different scenarios, and we'll see how that changes the design as well. I think that would be worth going over, and
Mhm.
I guess we can kind of go from there, right? So should I start
Yeah.
sharing my screen here? Let's see.
Yeah. Let's
All
see
right.
what you got.
All right. So here is a floor plan, an office floor plan. You can see this is an open office, and there's a lot of desks with some offices along the side, and we've got a large break room that's on the top right there. And let's assume that you can count all these desks here, Francois. But what's the first thing you would do, right? So I've already imported this
Mhm.
thing.
Mhm.
I just wanted to go through that piece already, but you obviously you'll get some clean floor plans, or a
Yeah.
PDF, a CAD file. What else would you have before doing anything in Ekahau? And we're gonna use Ekahau because that's what we use for design.
Yeah. So, and before I answer your question, Roel, I wanted to mention as well that we are recording this episode, like the video of it. So if you want to actually look at what we're talking about, you can go on YouTube and watch the feed, the video feed. If you just in case you're listening to the audio format of the podcast. Um, so yeah, so usually when I start a project in Ekahau, like you said, I will just import the floor plan. Before importing the floor plan, I will just make sure it's a clean floor plan. Sometimes, you have to kind of work with what the customer gives you. Maybe sometimes I like it when it's white, when the background is white, because as you add colors in Ekahau, it can stand out a little bit better, and you don't have variations of colors. So I make sure I have a clean white background, sometimes changing the brightness of the floor plan, adjusting the colors, making it black and white, and so on. Um, so once I have my floor plan, I will just import it. And then one thing that I always do in Ekahau is I change the name of the floor plan. I make sure that the name of the floor plan, yeah, in that little box here is clean, because I'm going to use it in my reporting. So if I want my reporting to be nice, clean, and professional, yeah, I will just make sure that I'm changing the name of the floor plan so it can relate to what I'm doing. Something I like to do as well is in the project notes, I like to add a couple of information about the project. So in Ekahau, you have the project menu, and under the project menu, you have this project notes section. And in here, you have a couple of fields that you can use to give some background information about the project. So you can, give it a name, a customer, location, responsible person, and you can add a few notes as well. So here I will just look at Roel putting my accents on my name.
I'm used to it. I'm used to typing out the accents now. All right.
So yeah, so I will just fill out the information here, and then sometimes
Yeah.
I would like upload, because you can upload pictures here. So you could upload the logo of your customer and then reuse that information on the front page of your report and stuff like that. So you could do things like this here in the project notes, just so you have that information you can reuse once again in the reporting.
Yeah, we're pretty big on using reporting in order to display this information to our customers. If you work
Mhm.
for an organization where you're doing it for your own employer and their offices, a lot of times you probably don't even have to generate a report. But it's nice to have something in place where you can just do a report template that you might have and just have that documented, right? All you have to do is export or create a report and just keep that aside, and you have it documented as to how you design something. And that's where
Mhm.
all these project notes come into use here. So that's like over at the top where you click on project and then project notes and just fill that out. You saw that it only
Mhm.
took me a few seconds to do that.
And also, if you're sharing the project with some coworkers or with your customers, then they'll have some place to go and relate into, what type of project it is. They can go back to the project notes and have that background information.
Yeah.
So that's nice. And after that, I pretty much start the design per se. So once you have the floor plans, you have to scale it. So we're going to assume that I can see you already scaled it, Roel. So
Yeah,
uh,
it's all scaled.
yeah, so we're
So
going to assume you have the scale. Um, if you don't have, if I don't have the scale for the floor plan that I'm working with, I would usually try to retrieve like a satellite image from Google Map,
yeah,
and then get like the entire length of the building and do some sort of pre-scaling. And then when I get to go on site, I will just refine that. Or if I went on site to gather the information,
yeah.
and I talk to the customer, I will just take my tape, my not my tape measurement, my laser measure, and then take the measure distance so I can use it to scale the floor plan.
Yeah, so that the scale is under the planning tab, and then right next to the arrow, there's going to be a ruler. You click on that ruler, you're going to want to select a decent size wall. Don't go for the
Mhm.
doors because sometimes, those doors may not be accurate. You do want to know if that door is exactly, 3.7 feet. So in this case, I did go on site. I had a laser distance tool, and
Mhm.
I was able to do this when I did a walkthrough. So I do this on a walkthrough where I'll measure from one end of the wall and then down to another end of the wall, and that's my
Mhm.
measurement. And you type that up here where it says 113.8 feet. It's already populated in here just because I know that's what the distance is. This isn't an actual office I did for one of my clients.
Yeah, so once you have the scale, the floor plan, then what I usually do is I create requirement profile,
All right.
right? So in Ikaha, if you go on the project, they have something called coverage requirements, coverage requirements profiles. And here I would usually create one for the customer that I'm working with. You'll see in Ikaha, you have some default different profiles you could reuse if you wanted to. But usually the way you would define your requirements would be based on, the type of clients and the type of applications that your customer is using. So usually what I do is, in the previous step where you gather all the requirements, I would kind of talk to the customer, try to define what they have, and then from that information I would kind of create my own profile, and I would just add it here in Ekahau, and I usually rename it using the name of my customer, so I know exactly what I'm doing, and then it relates to the project I'm working on. And then this is where, I guess, Roel, you can just explain what
So
requirements we're talking about here.
I like to build a different requirement as well, instead of using the ones that are built in. I mean, you could use these as a template and then just rename it to something that might fit for your customer's name or for your company's name, and then you can go ahead and adjust these. So I'll make this one the default requirement. This is what everything will be basically defined against. And if you want to keep 2.4 and 5 gigahertz requirements the same, you can just apply the same criteria to both bands down at the bottom. But obviously, we design for maybe it's not obvious for everyone, but we design for 5 gigahertz primarily. So we will uncheck that and define separate set of requirements for 5 gigahertz, whatever that may be for you, right? So if that's if you've got even tertiary signal strength, I don't design on tertiary signal strength because that typically leads to more access points, which a lot of my clients don't want to spend the money on. They're fine with having a secondary signal strength requirement, and I do go for a higher signal to noise ratio, along with a higher data rate requirement, because in this office, a small office space, you could probably get a higher data rate just because of how small it is. And then channel interference, this will show for the heat map that has a channel interference, where it'll tell you how many of those APs are operating on the same channel that can hear each other at a given signal strength, which will be down below. So if we say, we'll show an example. If we keep it at 2 for 5 gigahertz, and if you keep it we'll increase this to like 6, because when we do the design, we'll see with 2.4, there's going to be 3 non-overlapping channels. So we'll see that be affected if we even drop this to maybe negative 67. So this is telling me channel interference requirement 2 APs at a minimum, negative 80. That'll change the way the heat map is done or displayed for us in the channel interference heat map.
For the channel interference, the ideal situation would be to have no channel interference. So in order to have no channel interference, you will have to set it to 1 AP at minus about 80, minus 85, I would say. So that would be like no channel overlap,
which is nearly impossible to do, especially in like this environment.
Yeah, on 2.4 it's impossible. On 5 gigahertz, given the size, you should be able to make it work. But it's definitely that shows you how challenging channel interference can be. Yeah,
we'll show you when we get to when we start looking at the areas, because if I have a high capacity, we'll have more than 1 AP, and we'll show you like you can cover this whole thing with 1 AP, but as far as coverage, this is just coverage requirements, right? We haven't even gotten to capacity. So we're just talking about the coverage of this floor plan. Do you set number of access points minimum, Francois?
No, that's if you want to do, I mean, it's kind of, you could do the same thing. You looking at the secondary signal strength or tertiary if you want to do location. So I usually don't set this one.
I don't set this one either. You may have a requirement that says, all right, if I have a given area, I want at least 2 access points covering this area, and you would have to define a minimum signal strength. And that could be because of redundancy, as in if one access point were to go down, another access point can still provide coverage to make up for that coverage that is lost by that access point. So you could say minimum 2 APs at negative 85. So we'll see that requirement as well. We can dive into the heat maps and then adjust these coverage requirements to see how that changes even the report and the heat map and where the failures are. So we have round trip time. I think this will be more for and packet loss for the validation survey, which we won't be going into on this episode.
Yeah, I usually don't even bother with them.
Yeah. So we'll go ahead and close that out because we're done with our coverage requirements. It's now here in a drop down. If you are doing a lot of these surveys and you have this requirement, this specific requirement that needs to be met, you could create this document as a template and you just copy this document every single time and it'll have your requirements here. It'd be nice if we could always have ours in there. Yeah. Because I don't really use those. I use my own. All right. So we got requirements set. What's the next thing we should do, Francois?
Then I define the area.
All right. So the area tool is right up here under the planning tab. And the area is just to define what area is going to need to be met by our requirements.
So you should know at this point which area need to be covered. So I would just create a big area for, that was fast.
Yeah, that was really fast, right?
Yeah, for the whole. So here you created a big area for the entire floor, which is typically what I would do in this case.
So you draw it out. Basically, I just did it it was already there. I just had it hidden, but you're gonna click and then drag out an area that is of a requirement. So I drew in another area within the larger area. So you can have multiple areas in your design that maybe have different set of requirements. So actually what I see a lot of people doing is they'll build out different sets of requirements for maybe a conference room, right? So I actually don't like resizing it. But let's say this conference room down here has a different set of requirements than the whole office. So we could outline that conference room, and then using the arrow tool, I have that area selected. I can say this is called the boardroom, because we all know all the board members need really good Wi-Fi. So you could define a separate set of requirements just for this, because there could be different coverage requirements, but let's just say we want it for Skype link guidelines. And then this is where we start diving into capacity. So I guess we can use a small conference room to start as a requirement, but typically you want to understand how many devices are going to be used in this requirement area. And so this is where counting desks, for example, or knowing what I like to look at. I ask my customers how many people are going to be in this office, right? If they say 20, then I go, all right, maybe that's going to be 40 devices, maybe closer to 50. Because if you do 2 devices per person, maybe 3 devices per person, then you want to account for that capacity. And so just to start, this is a conference room, a pretty large conference room. It can fit like 20 people. So let's just say there's 20 people with a laptop. You can get pretty granular here with these profiles of devices and the type of devices, right? So we can see that the different features of these devices. A barcode scanner is a 1x1, one spatial stream supporting 20 megahertz channel width, versus a laptop, which can have a 3x3 3 spatial stream like a MacBook Pro and support 80 megahertz. So you can actually go in and configure your own profile if you know that this client has a specific device, right? Or maybe it's all, you want to call them all MacBook Pros, right? And then maybe you have a version that no one else has. It's the AX version MacBook Pro that can do dual band. It can do 160 megahertz. Like this is how granular you can get in with understanding its parameters here, and you can even set the offsets. Do you use the offsets in a predictive design, Francois? Because I do not use offsets in a predictive.
No, offset is more for when you do the validation. Yeah. um, yeah, what you're doing with the capacity planning and trying to add all of these details, I think it's nice because it kind of forces us as engineers to understand exactly, which devices will be there. Try to, do the work with the customer to understand and what type of devices to expect, what type of application to get an idea. The capacity planning in Ekahau will be some sort of, I guess, estimation, right? It will give you an idea. It will not be perfect. One thing you have to watch out is if you overestimate, you might overpopulate your space with too many APs,
Right.
and then that can introduce other issues on the RF side of things, right?
Yeah. And
So that's, yeah.
we can show that in this conference room because I have outlined this conference room as a separate requirement area, and then you
Hmm.
have the whole office floor plan as also its own requirement area. And so when you run the tool, we'll see that it'll change it. But I've set it to just generic laptop for now. You can define if that's like a Windows laptop with an Intel. You can define what those parameters are. Here on the next section defines the type of application usage or usage profile, and this kind of goes into how would we describe this, Francois? Because it's more along the lines of like application planning and the capacity, I guess, the type of
Yeah.
application that's going to be used in the requirement area. So you can define uh, multiple
Yeah.
ones here, right? So if I click on add, I can add a new profile. And let's just say, since we're looking at the boardroom, we can just call this a boardroom profile, just to keep it simple. And now I can start adding multiple types of application. And depending on that application, we can see what the total capacity required is. So there are some preset application profiles here. We can go with like email. Normal email usage is about 2 megabits per second, or if there's even one here for Spotify premium music. I've never noticed that before. 0.32 megabits per second, or if a lot of video is being used, if maybe in the board meeting they're just watching Netflix 720p, that's 5 megabits per second. And that's a requirement that is actually from Netflix. I've seen it in their documentation that they would use about 5 megabits per second. So let's make the assumption that, or actually, is there another video? I was going to say, let's do an assumption where board members walk into this meeting and they all have laptops and you've probably seen this, Francois. They all open up the meeting application, and let's say
Hmm.
they're doing a video conference. Every single one of them loves to open the video conference app and also play it at the same time, right? So they're even though it's displayed on the big monitor, the big screen,
Yeah.
they'll open it up on their own laptop. So if we go and pick video conference go to meeting, that's set to 5 megabits per second. That's one of the
Do you
applications.
want to share the screen?
Oh yeah, I should share my screen. So here I have the profile name. I clicked add to create my own profile, application usage profile. I've added a video conference GoToMeeting application here set to 5 megabits per second. If there's another application that I know about, you can go ahead and select it here as well. So maybe they're, I don't know, what should we select here, Francois? Like some file sharing,
The
OneDrive.
Yeah, you could. I mean, you could do it per application. Uh,
That's if you
like
really know what's,
Yeah, yeah, I would do that if I really know the application more, like in let's say in an industrial environment where you have very specific devices always using the same applications. But for office environment, what I usually like to do instead is I use the SLA.
yeah. So I have one
Yeah,
here. There's
like you said,
different
yeah.
types of SLAs, right? So you have SLA low, there's an SLA very low, there's a
Hmm.
normal. I wish it was in alphabetical order. Normal.
Yeah.
And then is there a heavy? Here it is, heavy
Yeah, yeah.
and very heavy.
So I would use that to kind of have an idea, right? Because you're never gonna know. And also one thing that's very challenging here for the capacity planning is that when you look at the Wi-Fi traffic, it's not constant. It's
Yeah.
it's
This is assuming
it
constant 11 megabits per
yeah,
second.
Exactly. So, but when you actually look at what's going on the Wi-Fi, you'll see that it's very sporadic. Like people they talk on and off. It's not always constantly using the channel.
Yeah.
So that's why the tool is nice to get a kind of an estimation. It doesn't mean it's going to be like this.
Yeah.
If you select 2 megabits per second, it doesn't mean the device will be using 2 megabits per second all the
All
time.
the time.
Uh, yeah.
That you would be planning then for the worst case scenario that
hmm
in this requirement
hmm
area, I'm going to need 11 megabits per second. I mean, you could design it that way, but it will lead to more access points. Um,
Yeah.
and we'll show you
Yeah.
that. So if I were to just leave it to very low, actually, let's use normal. So I'm going to scroll down. SLA normal is 2 megabits per second. And so if I leave it there, I've deleted all the other applications. I will close that out. And so we now have our area, conference room area with its own requirement. If I go to the larger area, the office area, I put in there 125 laptops with a low SLA and 125 generic smartphones with just a background sync. You could change that to a very low SLA. A lot of people are using their phones more often than normal. And then you could even add some notes here. You can add a picture for that office area, or you could add specific notes that might be pertinent to this area here if you want others to see.
Yeah, the notes for the areas, I usually use that to details all the capacity information. So I would say, here we're expecting 60 people, X amount of devices, and worst case scenario would be X, Y, Z. And I usually use that, use that notes to talk about anything that's specific to that area, pretty
Yep.
much.
And then if you're very, you want to change the colors of that area, you can. There's a little drop down here. So if you want to distinguish multiple areas, I can just say the office area is more blue, while the conference room area is a darker shade of color. So we've now set our coverage requirements, and now we've also set our capacity requirements. And if I go back, I also just use kind of the SLA, low SLA, because if you were to get into those, in an office environment, I typically use low SLA, normal SLA. I don't go too much into these very specific applications. You'd have to add almost every single type of application because in an office, you don't know also what type, every application that's going to be used and how often, how many people are going to be opening YouTube and just playing videos in the background. I know that happens all the time. Spotify happens all the time. So maybe the constants, you could add that into the floor plan. The other thing that I do add as far as areas goes are exclusion areas, areas that we do not want to be part of the requirement area. For example, bathrooms. So I already have those set. This is kind of just like a utility closet in this area here. So I've excluded that. They didn't need Wi-Fi in there. They didn't care if there was Wi-Fi in the bathrooms, although I try to cover those sometimes. So now it's more of a nice to have if Wi-Fi is there. Any storage areas I've excluded. So I have one large exclusion area and one area up here, which is just another storage area that they didn't need Wi-Fi for. So I exclude that. It's not going to be part of the predictive model. It doesn't mean that when you do go into the environment and you've deployed that there isn't Wi-Fi, you can go in there and validate how much Wi-Fi there is in there. We're just not going to care about it for this predictive.
And then the walls.
The
I
walls,
guess next time. Yeah.
So what I like to do is hide the areas now because I don't want to accidentally delete one, move them.
Yeah.
So up at the top under view, I actually just uncheck the areas here, and also the exclusion areas. I wish that also fell under areas. And then you've got your clean floor plan again. It's still there. It's just removing it from view. So the next thing you got to do is draw out the walls, right? So I don't have any walls shown here, and the walls is going to be important to to gather to have the attenuation areas in place. And so you don't have to watch us draw the walls. I've already added that here. I just made them all drywall to make it simple. I even made the doors drywall. So you can see here, you basically click on the planning tab. There is this button right here that is your building materials. If you click on the arrow, you can select wall, maybe a rectangular attenuation area, some freeform attenuation area, or a hole and floor tool. So I've selected wall, and then on the right side, you'll be able to select the different types of wall materials. In this example, I just use the drywall. If you've gone on site and taken a measurement, which I highly recommend doing, where you measure the wall attenuation, you could create your own profile. You could just click on the plus button next to that, whichever wall type you've selected, and it'll create a copy of whatever one you've selected here. You could then set the attenuation for this wall. So let's say this is 6 dB. You can set the width of that wall. So is this one set to 1.15 feet? If you do know how wide that is, you can change that. So maybe these walls are crazy and it's like 3 feet. And then
even that doesn't change the attenuation though.
No, I'm creating. No, it's just I like to add as many details as possible, because some of the things that I've noticed going into doing these is sometimes I wonder like how wide was that wall, how high did that wall go? Because not all walls go to the ceiling, or maybe there's something that sticks out from the top of the ceiling. So there's different things that I like to put in and have for my own sake when I go back home and go, what was this here? What was this wall again? Like, why is it there? Like, there could be a wall drawn out here, and maybe it's just kind of like a reception area or maybe a private area, but the walls didn't go all the way to the ceiling. So you could, let's assume, I don't remember what height this ceiling was, but let's say it only went about 5 feet up. And we can say that, but that was a metal wall. Like, I don't know, something crazy. And you want to have that documented, so that way, if it was a metal wall, it'd be kind of crazy, like 15 dB or something. But
I was going to say you watch too much of Star Wars.
But you want to have that documented, right? So you can adjust other walls. If you've drawn out all the walls, you could, and you say, oh, you know, I put the wrong walls, and you're afraid of drawing everything out again. You could actually click and drag and select multiple walls. And then I like to just right click on the wall, select change wall type, and then I can go ahead and change to whatever type that is. That way you don't have to delete them all and redraw it. Because I know this is a small floor plan. There have been floor plans where I drew out a wall type, and then you know what, the attenuation was actually different, so I had to go in and change them all.
It's also very useful if you have you know, a set of dry walls and a set of, you know, window walls, like right after one another. So what you can do is you can draw everything as a dry wall and then go back and select the segments that are window walls all at once to kind of change them. Yeah, like you did with the door right now. You selected all the door and changed the type.
I changed it to window.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I like to draw all the same wall type, just like that, especially for like long sections. Like, I know these were windows, although I kind of drew them out as all walls. So, so yeah, I selected these, change wall type. It's 3 dB, but you know, a window's also 3 dB. So if you want to change the aesthetic, sure. But a lot of times in my reports, I don't even show the walls. I just do it for having the attenuation in place. And you could do a measurement too to see if that window is in fact 3 dB loss. A lot of times mine windows are not. the ones that I work with here in the Bay Area. So I could set that to just 1 dB window. So we'll have that there. All right. So
So for the wall, just what I do usually, if I go on site and measure the attenuation of the walls, that's what I would use. If I didn't get to go on site, what I would tend to do is estimate the attenuation of the wall. So instead, for if I know they have drywall, instead of using 3 dB, I would use like 5 dB, for instance, just to kind of overestimate the attenuation when I do the design, just to make sure I don't run into bad surprises when I do the validation if I don't get to go on site.
exactly. Yeah, I do that too. I'll overestimate if I'm not able to go on site at all. You almost kind of plan for the worst case scenario.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right, so we got our walls drawn out. These walls, because I'm using one of the preset ones, it just goes to the ceiling. So just so you guys know that this is going to go to the ceiling. I don't have these walls set to a specific height. So the rest of this office here, there's no walls here because this is all just an open office. This is exactly how they have their desks set up. And then we can, you can make comments if there's something that you've seen on the map itself. There is a button for a map note. Maybe you want to say like this here. If it wasn't marked out, we want to say, all right, this is like a VIP room or CEO, just to keep note. Or
I use
if
that.
you're,
Yeah, I use the notes for the the taco room, the switch closet,
yep.
whatever they call it. Yeah,
So
we'll just identify that.
yeah, so
MDF,
you,
yeah.
so you want to MDF is good to know because let's say you're adding APs, you could kind of estimate the cable lengths for each of those APs and let someone know, maybe your whoever you're reporting to in this case, and say, hey, I'm designing for the floor plan. I'm noticing that some of these are going to exceed the Ethernet length, so maybe you need to identify another closet for some switches to be in place, or you just want to get as much data in here as possible, especially if the site is a location different from where you're at, and it's going to be difficult to get back to that location and know what has happened. So a lot of times I will take photos and then just kind of add them as notes just for my purpose. And we also do that for validation purposes as well. So over here, I will put like, this is a break room, just so I understand that I'm not needing to cover the break room as heavily as maybe the rest of the office. Or what's very common here in the Bay Area is that this is the all hands area. Like you can put that as well. And that would change your requirements too. So if you've made a comment in here and you go, oh, that was the wrong comment, that wasn't where I wanted, or note, that's not where I wanted that note, you can hover over your note, click on the 3 buttons there, you can edit it or just delete it. And it's the same for on the floor plan. If there's a note, you could click on it and then drag it to where the correct area needs to be, or just delete it completely.
Okay, I think we're ready to drop some APs.
All right. So there's 2 methods for doing the actual AP design here. You could select the icon that is just the access point, a simulated access point. And from the drop down, you're going to use the access point that you plan to deploy in this environment. Do not use a generic access point. Do not use a different access point from what you may deploy. You could use also the auto planner. The
What?
auto planner is a separate button.
What? Okay, sorry, what did you say?
Use the auto planner. So I use the auto planner just to place access points, and then I will move them around. So if you've got a large environment, you could use it that way, because
I
that
don't
kind of
use the
speeds
auto
things up.
planner, man.
I'll use the auto planner just to add the APs in there, and then I will start modifying how that design is done. So Francois sounds like he does the one AP at a time thing. So we'll show you both. All right. So we're gonna use Mist APs because Francois and I are both Mist Juniper partners. That's the AP of choice, vendor of choice that we're going to select here. And so I'm using the, excuse me, I'm using the one AP, simulated AP method. And in here, you just kind of have to pick where you want to start your design. I like to start with conference rooms.
Yeah, I like
Because
that too.
these are high profile rooms. They absolutely need reliable Wi-Fi. So I like to place access points in the most critical room. So let's just say I put one right here. All right, we're done, right?
So yeah, so what I do after placing the first AP is I would configure the transmit powers and the height.
Yep.
So in this case, you have the height of 7.9 feet, which is the
Yep.
default in Ekahau, about 2.4 meters. So I don't know how high the ceilings are, but I would measure the ceiling height,
Yeah.
and then I would just document it there.
Yeah. Let's just assume it's. Let's just leave it at the default. Let's just assume it is 7.9 feet. So that's has set your ceiling height now.
And then for the transmit power.
So we have transmit power for both 2.4 and for 5 gigahertz. So you'll definitely want to change that to kind of your starting point where you want to do how you want to set that transmit power. For 2.4, I like to make it as low as possible or turn it off. We'll get into that in a little bit. And then for power, I like to set it lower. So it's somewhere around between 10 and 12. I don't know how you want to do it, Francois. We both design differently, right? So
Yeah.
me and Francois have different design methodologies, and depending on the types of environments that we've been in. So we do things differently, and then we also adjust afterwards. So this is just for me, this is just a starting point for the design.
So for the transmit power, usually what I do is I would look at the client devices that I'm expecting to have in the network, and then I would study their transmit powers and what they support.
Yeah.
I would do that using the
matching,
profiler.
Yeah, you're talking about matching profile, matching transmit power to the devices.
Exactly. I don't want the AP to talk too loud because that's going to create other issues, a whole bunch of issues. So I want to make sure that the AP doesn't talk as loud or louder than the client devices. So I'll study how I'll study the maximum transfer power of the client devices, but usually I will even go down from the maximum transfer power of the client devices because client devices, they don't always use the maximum transfer power. They try to save battery life, and most of the time they're going to be below that. So if I'm designing for, I don't know, let's say a smartphone, and it's telling me that the maximum transfer power is like 17 dBm or something like that, I would just kind of go down maybe 3 to 6 dB and then use that as my starting point. And I like to do that because it gives me a little bit of wiggle room if I feel that in my design I need to increase the power of certain APs. I know that I have this little margin I can use in some cases at the end when you have to refine your design, especially when you have big environments, a lot of APs. Sometimes you need that little flexibility.
Yep.
And then for 2.4, what I like to do is I actually like to increase it. Usually I would bring it to the same level as 5 gigahertz, but then I would come back and disable some 2.4 radios. And this works if you do single band SSIDs. So if you don't share your SSIDs between the two frequency bands, so if you do one specific SSID for 2.4, one specific SSID for 5 gigahertz, then you could increase your 2.4 a little bit and then disable 2.4 radios to kind of minimize your co-channel interference. If you're planning on sharing the SSID on both radios and you increase the 2.4 too much, then you could have devices that kind of stick on 2.4 instead of connecting on 5 gigahertz. So that's going to depend on how you configure your network. But I like the single band SSID stuff, so that gives me the flexibility to raise the transfer power a little bit on 2.4 without having client devices that just stay on 2.4 all the time.
Yep. So it's I lost my screen here. So it definitely depends on how you want to design this, right? So let me try to get my screen back here. I don't know why I can't show my screen, but go ahead and keep talking about that design, your design methodology about the
Yeah.
transmit power and channels, and I'll try to get my screen back here.
Yeah, and then, so once you
Oh, there it
have,
is.
yeah, here you go. Once you have the settings configured for the first AP, then every time you're gonna click to add another AP, it's gonna kind of take the same settings into account. That's why it's nice to just set it for the first AP you placed on the map, because you won't have to do it again
Yeah.
afterwards. So
Yeah, that's why we focus so much on this first AP. Is because once you set this first AP, it does change everything. So here, we were just doing it on the left side where it shows the access points. You can drill in a little bit more if you click on the 3 dots and click on edit access point. You have a lot more detail to work with here. You can even change what type of mounting, which would change the propagation. So you can say it's on the wall, or floor, if that's if
yeah.
hopefully you're not placing the access point itself on the floor. Maybe you're using a special antenna, but you can do that. So here we're gonna just select ceiling tags. Do we want to get into tags, Francois? I just started using it. I know you're
Yeah.
probably using it more for your scripting.
Yeah, we can probably keep that for another episode, because
Okay.
that's gonna be you're
Yeah.
gonna open a new box there.
All right.
Um,
So we'll talk about that another time. You can look at Ekahau's documentation as well. But for the design aspect, you can then now see more details about the individual radios. They are linked right now. So if you were to modify the height, it'll also modify the height down here for the 5 gigahertz radio, because obviously both radios are in the same access point. So I'll leave it at 7.9. If you were dealing with an access point that had an external antenna, you could change the type of antenna that it's using and see its propagation. I want to keep moving because we do have another design for the warehouse, and that kind of goes into that. If you have any notes that you want to add for this specific access point, you can do so here as well, and include that in your report. So we have that first access point. I'm going to hide the notes because I don't like seeing them in the design. So I'll go to view, notes, and those are gone. I'm going to also hide the walls because I don't want to mess with those right now. So we've got one simulated access point here. If you were go to this heat drop-down menu to see the signal strength heat map, you can then see how awesome that is. So it can cover the whole floor, right? And so
you're looking at both frequency band, maybe.
2.4 and 5. So right here by default, it'll already select both bands. I like to just view the 5 gigahertz. This is the 2.4, so you can see because the 2.4 has the power transmit power is less than the 5. It has simulating a shorter. This is our requirement cutoff right there. It does not mean that the signal stops propagating, because if I were to hover over in the gray area, there you go. Sometimes it takes a while. You can see even in the gray area right over there, it's negative 67 dBm, which can be sufficient for many devices. A laptop specifically will be okay with negative 67 dBm and not move to another access point. So you can see in the simulation, in this predictive model, you can see what that signal strength is in a given area just by hovering over it. And again, it is a predictive. It's simulating that signal based on that data sheet of that access point. All right. The other method to adding APs, right? So once you do that, you can go back to the AP. You can copy it. So you can just copy. You can right click and paste, and add another one if you wanted to, and then move it. So I can put it on the opposite end. Or if you're dealing with Auto Planner, you can just click on Auto Planner at the top. It's going to look at your 2 areas, consider those 2 areas with capacity, or you can optimize it for mobile devices if you want. I don't even know off the top of my head what that setting does. Honestly, like, what does that even mean? So you select your
I'm not even sure
point.
I know 100% what that is, but it adds like a minus 10 dB to everything you do.
Yeah, so I don't do that because that's a little too much simulation for me. I will optimize it for capacity, which will take these capacity requirements in mind. Select your access point that you're using, set your transmit power. there's some advanced settings you could change here. So if you're, for example, if you're dealing with Meraki APs on 5 gigahertz, you can go to what channels are going to be used, or maybe there's in your environment, there's some channels you do not want to use. So you want to go in and deselect those channels because you don't want it to start planning for those channels, right? So you can change your other parameters like minimum data rate, band steering. I don't touch these. And I don't even touch like the SSIDs. I purely just use this for adding APs to the floor plan. And so this is the auto planner thinking you need 4 APs for your areas that you've defined, your capacity areas. So from here, I just kind of like move APs. And I like to look also at individual APs. So if you've got the signal strength kind of looking at everything, I like to look at just a selected access point sometimes and go like, wow, that broadcasts its signal throughout the whole floor plan. You could almost just go, why can't I just add an AP right in the middle and cover the whole floor? And that's because of capacity, right? That just means everyone's going to be on this AP. So I like to move APs around. Then I go, you know what, maybe this AP is not needed. So then you could just delete it. And then I just start moving. I was on 2.4. So I just start moving APs around where you think this design will be best. And then this is when you could start changing transmit power, right? So right now they're all at 8, 14 dBm for 2.4 and 5. And then you can start looking at all these different heat maps to look at capacity health. Will this meet capacity? And I'm on selected access point. So you can see like one access point will not meet the capacity of this whole area, right? Given the requirements we set for this area. But if we do my access points, you can kind of see like which one's meeting requirements for the area. And also when you're doing this is when you start looking at channels, right? And that's why I kind of use like even the channel planner just to help me. The channel planner is up at the top. If you click 1, 6, and 11, that icon, it will then help you optimize the channels just as a start. I wouldn't use this as, you select this, you create plan, and that's your plan. You'll want to look at how the channels are laid out, especially if you're using DFS. You can try to get Ekahau to disable some 2.4 radios for you, and we can see how that works. So for me, I like to look at the devices that are being used and see which channels those devices actually support. So if they don't support channel 144, then just remove that from your plan, or even 165. If they don't support those 2 channels, then remove it. Anything you want to add here, Francois?
Yeah, for the disabling 2.4 radios, I usually do that myself. So we'll just disable that option here and then do it myself. And then here, what you can also do is change the channel width. So if you think that you can make 20 megahertz work in that environment, then you can select it here and and then
You don't want to do 160 megahertz?
no. I usually stick to 20 or 40
40,
maximum. Yeah. So that's where I would change it. And like you said, it's going to give you an idea.
So I'll hit create plan.
But if you're thinking of doing a static channel planning, you'll be better off doing it yourself. It will be more optimized if you do it yourself. And plus, if you need to alternate, I know some people like to alternate, channels from Unit 1 and channel from Unit 3. You could do that easier if you just do it manually.
It's all just DFS channels. So that's something you want to think about, because if this area gets a lot of DFS hits, these channels may go offline. So you want to go in, you can, as Francois was saying, like changing the channels individually of these access points. You can do so like here on the left, I've got this AP selected, and right here, I'll see the channel number. And if you click on that, you can select another channel. So then there you go. I've changed it. I'm at capacity health, but this is where you may want to then look at your co-channel interference. So this So what a lot of people will do also is look at channel interference and also capacity. So I'll show you how, if we go back to capacity health, you'll see it's all green. So if we had a lot of APs on the same channel, I have other windows that are blocking my view. Let me move that. You can see now we have went over our requirement of having more than one AP on the same channel. So if we hover over this gray area, it'll tell us you have co and adjacent channel interference, 2 of them, and it shows you which APs those are and the simulated signal strength. You could also change that requirement. It said co and adjacent. Over at the top right, it says options. You could go down to this visualization specific options and change the interference mode to maybe just co-channel. I typically leave it at co and adjacent. I like to know both. But that's one way to look at it. So now if I also change this to channel 36, I'm assuming this will change capacity health. Yep. So now that changes the capacity health because they're all operating on the same channel. So you can see how much co-channel will affect a given area for capacity. So because these 2 APs are on the same channel, the capacity is shared between these 2 APs in this area. So that's one way to look at.
And in the real world, like here with Mist, what will happen is Mist is using RM, and they have a pretty extensive RM, actually multiple RM algorithm that are running in the background to kind of assign the channels. So here, at this point, when you do the design, this is just going to give you an idea. But what you really want to do if you're deploying Mist is once the access points are deployed, you want to do a validation survey and try to understand, the channels you have configured, the channel that RM had configured, and try to see if you have any co-channel interference.
Yep. So here, like we have co-channel again. Like you can either change them manually or go through a channel planner. So I'll just go ahead and change one of these to a different channel, and then I don't have any co-channel interference. And disabling 2.4 radios, you can do the same way as going into here and clicking on AX. You see the protocol there, and for the 2.4 radio, and then just select it to off. And so now that 2.4 is off, you can see how much 2.4 signal strength we have coming from one AP, for example. And there we go. We've now, if we look at all our access points and do like 5 gigahertz, we pretty much covered the whole office. So if you're seeing like, there is somebody that sits here, that poor guy is going to have low signal. But if you look at it again, a lot of times I'm not too concerned in the predictive of like these little gray areas, because a lot of times in this predictive, what I've seen is sometimes the signal does go pretty far. And so there you go. I've covered the whole thing. And then you can see over here on this right side, like, all right, what our signal strengths kind of look like. So that's pretty much like going through. This is a basic office, so this design is a lot more simpler to go through. But there are other heat maps you could look at. So we were looking at the number of APs required to cover this floor plan. It tells you how many APs just by hovering over it. It's going to say 3 because there's only 3.
Yeah. One thing I do at this point when I'm done placing the APs, make sure that the requirements are met. I like to document things that I will be using for my report. A lot of customers, they're asking for a map of AP locations, right? They're asking of AP type. They're asking of, if you're using external antennas, what type of external antennas are you using? They're asking for mounting options. So I would just document all of this in the project file so I can just export that data when I do my report. And it just it just helps us to just optimize that reporting. I've seen a lot of engineers I work with, document the information in different documents. They may have one document for the AP location, another document with like an Excel sheet of an AP list and AP details and all of that. So instead of multiplying all of these documents, I just like to document everything in the Ekahau project file, and I just use the reporting tools or some Python to just export that data, and it saves me so much more time. So this is when I will just go back to the AP, maybe add some AP notes, maybe add some tags, and use that to document the what I would document usually is the how to mount the AP. So is it on the wall? Is it under the ceiling? The height, make sure the height is right. And then if they need specific mounting bracket, I would specify it over there as well. And then I would also specify usually is the length for the service loop, just so the installers know how much cable to leave. So if we need to move the AP for some reason at the validation stage, we know we don't have a cable issue. We have some wiggle room to move the AP around a few feet. And also what you can do, if you do that precisely, you can actually also generate your bill of material directly from Ekahau, which is a nice bonus as well, because you could just send that information to the customer. The customer it's like a no-brainer for them. They can just order the equipment. You've just told them exactly what they needed to know. So yeah, that's depending on how many APs you have, that might take a little bit of time because you have to, do it for every AP. But I mean, that's the time you save down the road because you won't have to do it somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. And I will share that if you're using like IB Wave, they will have a separate section to list out your bill of materials, all the cable length. So they do go into a lot of detail on the IB Wave Wi-Fi design application. If that's something you're really looking for, Ekahau doesn't really have like a separate area for building out a bill of materials. You just kind of have to use what's available to you to add those in, such as using notes as an example, or maybe in the project notes, you could start listing all that out as well, and then using report template to call that out.
And you can use the tags as well now to define exactly, what I use is I would go ahead and find out the exact name of the equipment. So, if it's an AP, like I would put the exact name of the AP that you would find on a quote from the vendor, and we use that to populate my tags. So you can have a bill of material that speaks to whoever you're purchasing your equipment from.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a really basic of going into a design, just kind of how we look into it. We could look at secondary signal strength, add your notes, the details, excuse me, of the project, and then just kind of looking at making sure you're as accurate as possible when it comes to this design, so you can meet the requirements. And these are the reason why we fill out the requirements, which is again these areas, is because that is what all of this is looking at. Is this whatever I had put here in this office area requirement and in this conference room requirement? That's how we're looking at these details here, and whether capacity is met or coverage is met, right? Coverage requirements were set over here. So that's why these details are important, because if I change this to, I don't know, -40, we'll see that these requirements will it change? It's such a small office plan.
You have to share your screen. Wow.
Oh, shoot. Yeah. My button got messed up, so I can't even share my screen. But yeah, if I try to change the coverage requirements to like -40 for 5 gigahertz, I was trying to simulate how it will fail the requirement.
Check the stats. If you check the stat, it didn't change because under your area, you probably have another profile. You have Skype guidelines, you see. So under your coverage profile. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we didn't change that to CTS. So there.
Here you go. It looks like potatoes.
So again, like this green, the color area is because that is that's the end of our requirement area there. But if I hover again over the gray area, that's just outside of our requirement area. So it's -44. And you can see that in the legend too down below, like that. I can actually click and drag this to adjust it again and change the requirement for coverage. So again, like fill in those requirements, your coverage requirements, capacity requirements. That's what's going to make this design as accurate as possible. One thing I do want to talk about is not going too crazy with requirement areas. I've seen some people will like create a requirement area for every single little thing. And then what happens is you could create a situation that requires a lot more access points, because if you define each area and set each one as its own like application usage, where it's kind of a crazy setup where you go, there's like 150 people laptops here, and it's like low SLA, and this is also 150, and then you also set the larger area, that, and then you use auto planner, that will put in way too many access points. And so that's why Francois likes to do the individual access points, because you don't want the auto planner to kind of give you that wrong information. It's just the auto planner is just doing what based on Ekahau's calculation of these areas. So if you go crazy with the areas, they're going to look at every area and go, wow, there's going to be 100 devices in that small area. Let me put in, 10 APs. Oh, there's a larger area as well. Let me put in another 10 APs. So I've seen areas where there are areas within us, like nested areas, but then also the larger area has too many devices as well. So just be careful with doing areas.
And also, when you gather the requirements and you talk about capacity to your customers, you have to understand what they want to do. You have to set expectations, because sometimes they will just tell you, this is like, for instance, if it's a classroom, they'll tell you, this is a classroom, we're expecting 60 students, and they all will have 3 devices each. And then so you end up with like 180 devices doing, doing video all at the same time, which will not happen, because it's students, they might have 3 devices, some might not, and then but not all of them will
Not
necessarily
all
be
3,
connected to the
yes.
Wi-Fi. Yeah, not all active at the same time. So you kind of have to set expectation as well, and understand what you're doing. My personal rule, I guess, to draw areas is, if I'm expecting more than 100 devices, I will draw an area. So if it's like a small room, I don't bother. If it's like a bigger classroom, like let's say in a higher ed environment, then I would just draw an area. If it's a hospital, I would just usually do it only for like big rooms, or maybe the cafeteria or places like this where you're expecting higher device count. But for the rest, I will just create a big area for for my building.
Yeah, when you're doing your design, go ahead and check that out and see how much of a difference that's going to make in your designs, because that can be creating a large bill of materials, right? And that's when the client can go, whoa, this project's going to cost way more than I thought. And it may be due to an area that might be having such a high capacity requirement that might not be a true capacity requirement, right? Like what Francois said, like all those devices aren't going to be streaming at the exact same time. So you just want to be careful of that, and do something like a take rate, right? If you've got 100 people walking into this office, what's the take rate of all 100 people using 3 devices at the same time? Just cut that down. But obviously there's like a fine line to that, because you don't want to under the requirements, right? So it's just you have to use your best judgment here. Use the tool to the best of your ability. And I do want to say, Francois, this was a lot longer than I expected talking about this floor plan.
Yeah.
Maybe
we can do the one in another episode.
We'll do the warehouse in its own separate episode, because we'll probably talk just as long on the warehouse.
The one thing I wanted to mention is, the goal of the design is to to meet your requirements. So, setting up those requirements is very important, and I guess we'll talk about that another day. But once you have your requirements, the goal of the design of you placing the APs on the floor plan becomes meeting those requirements. You notice we didn't talk about how many APs per square footage. We didn't talk about distances between APs. I've seen that in the field where
You could
people are like, oh,
measure
I
the
just put an
distance.
AP every 50 feet or whatever. We didn't talk we didn't talk about all
Yeah.
of this because
Yeah. I mean,
that's
I can
not
show you
really.
that right now. If you've got your
Mhm,
APs already placed, just take your ruler and then just measure between the axis points. And
mhm.
that between those two axis points, you got about 85 feet.
Yeah, but I mean that's going to change drastically depending on which environment you're designing for,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
This is why we don't
So,
like those generic numbers. Like, all right, for
mhm,
or when somebody just wants a quote saying, all right, we have this new office that's going to go up. Approximately how many APs per square footage do you think we'll need?
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, I mean, the only way I can see you do that is if you have a lot of offices and they all look the same, a lot of location, they all look the same, and you've already done 100 of them, and you kind of extracted, a number that you can reuse reliably.
Yes, yes.
That's where I can see, you using that technique. But if you just like Roel and I, you work for different customers and you work in different environments, maybe across different countries, buildings are not going to be made the same. You're going to have different layouts depending on which industry you're working with, and those numbers can drastically change. So that's usually not something I look at. I just make sure I set up my requirements properly, and then I use Ekahau to meet those requirements exactly like how we showcased it today. So that's something that I can rely on, I guess.
All right. So in another episode, we'll go into how we do warehouse, and go more into detail about antennas and how to move those antennas, angle them, and look at attenuation areas as well, because that's something I use in warehouses. This is kind of the
Mhm.
start of how we do a design for any of our projects, kind of a starting point. So you will see some similarities of how we implement that in a warehouse scenario or more of a complex scenario. But
Mhm.
if you guys do have any questions, please do hit us up on the show notes. Go to cleartosend.net/252. I believe that's the episode
Yeah.
252.
And then
Uh,
I was thinking maybe one in another episode we can go over the reporting and showcase, show you guys what we kind of produce for our customers, so you can see what we're talking about when you talk about reporting. One thing I like to do as well for the design is I like to document the installation of the access points. So it's like
yes.
a separate document that the customer can give to the installers, and that
Yep.
explains how to install everything.
No, we did talk about reporting in a different episode, but maybe we can update it. I
Hmm.
remember we've done one on reporting. So it's gonna. We have like a number of episodes that will go down into like how we use Ekahau to do the design, how we do the scripting that
Hmm.
Francois does, the reporting, custom reports, like all of that kind of ties into how we use the tools in order to provide a better experience to the customer and have
Hmm.
them be confident with the design. And also we can talk about validation as well in another episode.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, guys.
All right.
If you guys do have any questions, head over to the show notes, cleartosend.net/252. Let us know on Twitter if you want to add or correct anything, or maybe add some input of how you do it as well. Again, like even in this episode, me and Francois do it very differently. We have different workflows, but our main goal is to try to get a design as accurate as possible in order to have a successful rollout, and then have that validation done as well to show that you did meet the requirements. So we will cover all of those in future episodes. If there's anything that you want to add, again, reach out and we'll see you guys on the next episode.
Thank you, guys. Have a good week.
Bye,
Bye
guys.
bye.